Let's learn in this Lightboard session about the options for configuring an Azure Container Apps with a custom domain name that could be exposed publicly on the internet or internally and privately within the virtual network. When we create an Azure Container Apps, we would have our environment, and within the environment you might have one or multiple container apps. So we will have app number 1, app number 2, and so on until app number n. For each one of these applications, Azure will generate an FQDN, a public FQDN by default, that will route traffic to each one of these applications. So as part of the DNS configuration on Azure, you would have public domain name for app1 dot the name of your environment, then the name of the Azure region dot containerapps.io. And you'd have the same for application number 2 and application number n. All of these domains will resolve to the private IP address of your environment, or actually to the public IP address of your environment, because your environment here is public. So it would have a public static IP address. So now all of these domains will route to that public IP address, and depending on the FQDN used to connect, it will be routed to the right application through the ingress within the Container Apps environment. So that's the default behavior of an Azure Container Apps. However, in real life, we want to use a custom domain name instead of using this domain name that is provided by Azure. So we would have our own DNS zone, and there we want to use something or a custom domain name like mycompany.com. And we want our applications to have the following FQDNs. So it would have app1.mycompany.com, app2.mycompany.com, and appn.mycompany.com. So Azure Container Apps will enable you to achieve this configuration. It will ask you to again route all of these FQDNs to the public IP address of the container apps, and then it will ask you to verify your DNS, the ownership of your custom domain name, by providing a TXT record. It will ask you, please, here is the TXT record, put it in your DNS zone publicly, and then Azure Container Apps will go to verify that TXT. So from here it will go verify. If the TXT record is within your DNS zone, then it means that you really own that custom domain name. If not, then this configuration will fail. So this works just fine for a public container apps, a container apps that is exposed on the internet. But now for an enterprise that wants to implement a private Azure Container Apps and use custom domain names, here we'll find an issue. Let's see what that issue is. Enterprises typically will create a private Azure Container Apps. It means that here they will have their own virtual network. Let's say this is a spoke network. Within this spoke virtual network, we would have our environment, inside of which we would have multiple applications. Let's say app 1, app 2, and app 3. Now we want these applications to be consumed either from within the virtual network or from within other peered virtual networks like the hub, for example. So we might have here another network that is the hub VNet, and we might also have other networks connected to that hub like on-premise networks or other spokes right here. And then we want those networks, including the hub, to be able to resolve the private application through a private custom domain name. So in this case, if we try to implement this same solution here by creating our own custom domain name and a DNS zone, then adding those records to each application, actually this solution will not work. Why? Because here, when Container Apps environment will verify the TXT record, it will actually verify it only on public domain names. It cannot verify it on a private domain name. I mean here on the private DNS zone that will be used by this spoke virtual network. And that's kind of limitation today. Things might change in the future, so keep an eye on that. And until it will be resolved, what you can do today is a workaround that is using Azure Application Gateway. Your gateway will be attached to the spoke virtual network, and thus will it could access your environment. So it would have here its own private IP, and then could access that environment using the default provided private DNS zone. And then on the application gateway, there you can implement the custom domain names. So from here, you can define app1.mycompany.com, app2, and app number n. And here on the application gateway, we won't have that txt record verification, so it should just work, and those domains will be private domains. And of course, those domains will be defined on a private DNS zone. And each one of these domains, actually, it will route to the FQDN of the default created FQDN for the container apps, which is in this case here app1 dot the name of the environment dot region dot container apps io. Here I put the name of the environment, but actually that's the generated name for the FQDN. It will be generated by Azure Container Apps. So this way, this name will be resolved right here at this level, and it will be resolved to the private IP address of the Azure Container Apps. Because as we create a private Container Apps environment, it would have a private IP. Again, things might change, so keep an eye on the updates on Azure Container Apps for the networking side. Thank you.